Welcome to the Aristocrats Soccer Podcast, the elite soccer podcast in all of soccer podcasting and podcasting in general. Co-host David Harris. I'm here with Jake Keegan, my co-host. Jake, what's going on?
Nothing much, Dave. I'm looking forward to this, as I always am, to record with you.
Yeah.
No guests today, so we just
no guests.
So I'm sure we have an interesting topic to discuss. Do you want to share that with the people?
Yeah. So we're going to pick up on our recent episode with Michael Lewis, where he talked about Gus Xikis. Gus, really, really close friend of mine. You got to meet him a bit when you were playing, back in the day with Westchester Flames. You were back young college player, and Gus was involved with that club, and did a lot of other things in soccer. Unfortunately, we lost him, last year, 2020. Back in April is when he finally passed. It was due to brain aneurysm that he had, and Gus is, as I said, a good friend of mine, but also a big figure here in New York, in soccer. And then, definitely had an involvement on the game nationally too. And just was one of those people that, he loved to meet, loved to have a good time. And, just very important for the game, very important for the development of the game here in America. You need people like us throughout the country for this game to grow, because he knew how the game should be run, from a organizational level, from an administrative level. He knew exactly what should be done, what shouldn't be done, and he always try to do the right thing for the game. Put so much time and effort into it, and this is for all the folks here on Long Island, in New York, that know Gus, knew Gus, and with so many of us miss him so much. He left us way too early, unfortunately. In his late 60s when he passed, and had so much more left to give to the game. But there was a lot of different areas that Gus touched on in the game. So I just wanted to take what we did with Michael and kind of build on that and try to give a little bit of a tribute to Gus in a way I think he'd be proud of. Gus loved it when I wrote a quote for him. And, I was very good at quoting Gus because I wrote the quotes myself. And Gus loved that. He loved his quotes. He loved to be quoted. Everybody, I guess, likes to be quoted. And, we started that off, pretty early on when I first met Gus, about 8-9 years ago, 10 years ago now, when I started getting involved in covering the game locally here in Long Island and New York, more at the amateur level, but also I'd be going to Red Bull games. I'd be going to, events like that. And then I'd be covering local games, and also covering players from the area that had from the Long Island area in particular, that had gone on to make it professionally. So I'd be doing all kinds of writing and articles like that for a local soccer magazine, and just doing it for fun. To this day, I still would be open to the idea of potentially making money from soccer, but I haven't been able to find a good way of doing that.
I don't believe you. You've had enough opportunity that you always seem to turn down.
I know, but it just when you're trying to balance that with career and everything else, it's like it gets a little hard. You got to really commit to it, and also I think if I'd done some of these things when I was younger, I would have had more energy and more time to commit, to doing something like being an agent or but anyway, but with Gus, so I met him as I was covering the game locally and the Long Island League, and very quickly Gus brought me into the fold for the Flames. And at that point, so we're talking 2013.
For better or for worse?
For better, it was for better. It was for better. There was frustration along the way, which we'll get into, and it ties into Gus, which is why he ultimately left. And then, I hung around for a little bit longer than him, but not much. And then I ultimately left too. But nobody with like any real bad intentions or anything, just differences of opinion on how things should go. But when I got in 2013, you had already had pretty successful years with the Flames in 2011, 2012. And in 2012, you had moved on to Jersey, as we've covered before, and Jersey Express. And then when 2013 came around, and you were trying to find the place to get some games in, you played with Jersey for 2013. There was a question mark at the point, of like, why isn't Jake coming back to play for the Flames? It was in some people's minds, and some of the players that had been there, were like, can we get Jake back? And so it was sort of like like where's Waldo? It's like, where's Jake Egan? And so that became one of my missions in life, was to track down the answer to that question. Also, at the time, but we're kind of deviating for Gus, but it's a funny sidetrack. Was at the time we've covered why he didn't go to the Philadelphia Union, but I was reporting for the local magazine. I was tracking Leo Fernandez, and Don Anding was a player that got drafted by the Philadelphia, went to Philadelphia Union, got signed by Philadelphia Union for I guess Harrisburg and the Union. And the third piece of that puzzle was you, of the draftees, as far as like, guys I was interested in covering, but that was for the Flames angle, not for the Long Island Magazine. But I'd be asking them, and I'd just be getting these answers like, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. And, just, we'll try to get back to you. And, just like a shroud of mystery over this Jake Egan fellow. And, so when he popped up with Jersey Express, it became very interesting. So, but anyway, that's sort of like it. It ties into how we connected. But without Gus, we never would have connected. We never would have connected. So most likely, so Gus brought a lot of people into my life that I got to meet, for better and for worse. And I'm still debating that with our relationship. But anyway,
definitely with this podcast, for better or for worse.
I know we wonder on a daily basis. Gus, did you do a good thing for us here or not? But I got to meet a lot of really cool people at a time, and I still to this day feel really close to a lot of the people that I met with Gus, and a lot of really just good-hearted soccer people. Some like I felt like I met my people I had something in common with. Finally, my whole life I've been searching for people who love soccer, just as much as I did, and I found that. So that was Gus, and actually he loved it even more than I did, which is I didn't think was possible. And I met a lot of other people through Gus, because he was so well known in New York, involved in so many aspects of the game, whether it was amateur referees he was involved with. He worked with them, through the administration of our local amateur soccer league, the Long Island Soccer Football League. Gus was a president of that. And then he was also second vice president for the state association. So Eastern New York, one pretty big state association, New York City, right? So the lead for the amateur side. So for the men and women soccer leagues that play in New York, in and around New York, Gus was involved in that. And Gus had multiple titles in both organizations too, by the way, like not just one role, like he had like 2 or 3 roles in each one. Then on top of that, he was involved with USASA, which if folks don't know about USASA, it's worth looking up. The United States Adult Soccer Association, I believe is what it spells out. But it basically, they run the amateur soccer in all the United States. So on a national level, they do have influence. They do have a say as far as how the game is run. With USSF, they vote in the election. Gus is a delegate. When he was with Eastern New York, he would vote. As one of the handful of people that'd be voting on, which up until recent times wasn't really a huge thing, because it was like, okay, Sunil Gulati or whoever was before that, right? But it became a much more important thing, as we all saw in recent times. And like Sal Rapaglia is the president of the organization, and Sal, really cool guy, really interesting guy if you get to meet him. Unfortunately, he's a little further along in life. He's a little older, and he's not, he's not the Sal Paglia of 20 years ago. But when you get to a point in his age, roll like that, right? And when this election came up, Sal got interviewed by Grant Wall, of all people, and for Sports Illustrated, and I think Sal didn't represent himself the best way he could have. Grant did a pretty bad job of portraying him. You're taking an Italian American man from Brooklyn, Staten Island, in his mid-late 70s with whatever, right? I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to diagnose him, but he's not 100% where he was, and he's got a different outlook than he's calling women girls, and that was one of the big bones of contention. But you have to put context, I think, into things, and I'm not trying to excuse that. We live in a different age today where that isn't acceptable. We want to refer to women as women, but it's just, if you meet Sal, he's not a bad guy. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are pretty nice people that just I think if you just meet them and talk to them and understand where they're coming from, as we get older, they come from different background, and a different way of life, and different outlook on things. So,
but not only that, I don't even know if I feel like I would call some of my teammates boys. I don't even know if that's right. I haven't read the article, but I haven't, not even really aware of the situation. But I don't even think that's that derogatory, is it? Really?
Well, no, but I think it's just, we're very sensitive these days, and I think for the most part, rightly so. But I think, again, I think we have to keep things into context. And, if you sat and had a conversation with Sal, he's not a bad guy. He's pretty harmless. And, that whole thing came up around the time, Gus is involved in that group, or he was. And that's how I got to meet all these people. So I got to meet Sal through that. And then when I saw what Grant Wall did with that, I just, and then all these other journalists, like all these soccer journalists, from, I don't even follow them anymore because I just think they're a waste of time. But like Marcotti, all these ESPN commentators and other people acting all outraged and, oh my God, it became a huge thing. Here's this guy, he's out of touch, and he's running the game of soccer, in New York, administrative level. He's voting in the election. This is the guy one of the guys deciding the votes, and it's like, well, okay, there is that angle to it, but then let's flip it on the other way around. And what is being done in the game, and why are you having folks that or if you don't feel like they're at the level of voting, then why are you letting them vote? It's just. I think Grant really took it and ran with it. Just, typical journalist, shady way of doing it, where you're taking somebody, exposing them, and taking advantage of them, and Sal did it, but, just if it were my dad or something, I wouldn't have let him do the interview, but whatever, I'm not blaming Sal's kids. I think they just didn't know about it. He probably did it on his own, but whatever. Yeah. But, so I just, so I got involved in a lot of things to us, though. A lot of interesting people, a lot of really cool people got to meet, and just a lot of, with the Long Island Soccer Football League, Gus was the president. We'd have our board of director meetings, and, once a month, and then we'd have we'd have 2 meetings a month. So this isn't like your local organization where you just go, you put in a little bit of time, you have a little sale for something, raise some money, This was like a full-time commitment, This was like another job, because this is the way Gus ran it. And, he was very proud of it, and he wanted it to be the best league he could make it. And, so we were there twice a month for very, very long meetings, very hours and hours and hours of debating of stuff that would become very, minute detail. But, it was, if you took it too seriously, I felt like, I'm still kind of involved with the guys. I kind of sit down from the board, but I might still go back with them. We'll see. But anyway, it just, if you take it too seriously, you'd be wringing your head. But if you took it with a little bit of a lighthearted approach, then, you just kind of relaxed and enjoyed it. And then we'd all go to the diner afterwards, have a nice meal. And Gus always seemed to know a good diner to go to, and we just go out and have a good time. And that was the real essence of things with Gus, was like trying to have a good time, and going to games. We'd be going to amateur games on the weekends. We'd be watching, looking at different players, but more so just to meet friends and have a good time, go for a bite to eat somewhere afterwards. Some of the clubs are pretty cool. Like they come from different ethnic backgrounds, different cultures. Some of them have like clubs, in Long Island or in the city, like clubs, like actual clubs, like a club where you go to, and it's not like a nightclub, but it's more like a place where you go and have food. They serve food and they have events, and they have a place if anybody's having an event, a birthday party or something like that, wedding. Like this, I'll always still remember the Istria Club, which is in, I think it's in Astoria, and it's right on the border if it's not in Astoria. And it's like this little tiny like storefront, but then when you go inside and you go downstairs, it's actually a pretty big place. So it's like all these people from that area, from the province, I believe it was province of Istria. So that's mostly Croatia, part of Italy. And they're all here in New York, and they all have a piece of this club, and you have to you have to be a member. I think you had to become a member many years ago in order to continue to be a member, and it gets handed down from generation to generation. So it's just, and you're having different food, and it's just a different experience. It's interesting. It's cool. It's different culture. It's something you can get in New York that it's not easily found elsewhere, in this country. And things like that, you got to experience with Gus. Lots of cool events, lots of cool places, and lots of interesting characters. Gus would be he was the cup chairman for the region, for USASA Region 1. So that was his role. He was involved in administration USASA Region 1. Okay. So there's only 4 regions in the country. So the Region 1 basically covers from like Maine on down to, I think, Virginia or something.
West Virginia, yeah.
Yeah. And, so all of the cups, the Amateur Cup, the Amateur Open Cup, which is the difference between the Amateur and the Amateur Open, is that amateur clubs do have players that are still on professional status registered. So it could be a pro coming off of a contract, and they're playing with an amateur club, and so they can play in that cup, but they can't play in strictly the Amateur Cup. So there's 2 different distinctions, which sometimes people want to think it's duplication, but there is a distinction, and they're very big into tradition in the amateur soccer game, in this country. So they keep going with it. Over 30 national cup, over 40. So, I don't think they have a women's. They have had it, but I think the women's amateur game is kind of, in a different state of transition in this country. There is a league in New York, the New York Metropolitan Women's Soccer League, which Caroline played in, right?
Yeah.
CPR, yeah. And but there's not. It's hard for the league here in Long Island. It's very well run. They're more into recreation. It's not as like competitive amateur. It's a very distinct. There is a distinction there with the amateur where it is competitive. I mean, a lot of people don't necessarily see it that way, but it is. It's not like a recreational league. You have to, anybody can't just go and play. Sometimes you do see some people there and you wonder what the heck they're doing there, but it's also funny when you see people that are like, portraying themselves to be like these, professional coaches, and they've coached at a high level, and they've played at a high level, and they're this and they're that. There's a lot of them around, and then you see them and they're like, the best they ever did was like a reserve for the men's team, that my friend ran, and it's like they couldn't even make the first team, but they're a coach, and you see a lot of that. So it's like,
I feel like you're talking about someone in particular, but we don't have to name them.
No, I'm talking about multiple people.
Multiple people.
Unfortunately, I'm talking about a lot of people, a lot of guys I've seen, and probably that's what a lot of guys I've seen that are like professional coaches. There's a lot of them around. Like they wouldn't even get in as a reserve, let alone a first team player. You know, a lot of these amateur teams back traditionally and still to this day have reserve teams, you know, especially a bigger club. And, you know, I'm a professional coach, but, you know, okay. But anyway,
well, here I have a question. I have a question for you. So, Gus, obviously, I think the thing that's kind of missing in American soccer culture is kind of that lower league fandom that you have in England, you have in Ireland, where you can just kind of go down to your local club. And I mean, we have it in New York to some extent with the Cosmopolitan League. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a supporters call with the Forward Madison supporters, and some of the supporters, maybe 15 of them, it was obviously it was the diehards, but they were getting kind of emotional because they were saying like how much this club means to them, and not necessarily just the club and not necessarily watching the games, but it's the community that they now feel a part of. And it's people that moved to Madison and didn't really have a group or like a group of people that they really felt close to, and they didn't felt like they belonged. And they felt like Forward Madison coming in with the supporters group, the flock, really gave them that opportunity. So now tying it back to you, I don't know if you were kind of that drastic in that you didn't feel like you belonged, but before you kind of got in contact with Gus and you met all these soccer people that you had never met before, and you had said like you've never met as many people that were passionate about the game as you were until you met Gus.
Right.
So how much did Gus kind of change your life in the sense of like feeling like you belonged?
Huge over the last like 10 years, huge. Like, you know, now it's like I have so many friends and people I know, and because of Gus, you know, because I mean, you know, God, I mean, you know, definitely myself, you know, because I put myself out and I try to get along, you know, but Gus made an introduction, and you know, like I would be going with Gus, and I was Gus's friend, and I'd be doing social media for the league and things like that, and you know, just trying to help promote the game. And initially, that's kind of how I got involved with it, and trying to promote the players and trying to promote the teams. And you know, to answer your question with like fandom, you know, and it ties into Gus, you know, like, and you mentioned the Cosmopolitan Soccer League, which is a great league, and now a lot of the bigger clubs from that league are playing. And they've created another league called the Eastern Premier Soccer League, which is a league at a higher level. So like the really big clubs, like a Lansdowne Boys, New York Cyprians, New York Greek Americans, FC Westchester, but you also have Junior Lone Star or Philadelphia, Lone Star from Philadelphia. So that's the wrinkle, is now you have teams from Philadelphia, and there's another league that Region 1 is created, where you have like Motown FC, I'm trying to think of the other big team from Jersey, the Lions, the Jackson Lions.
Is that UPSL?
No, that's actually another league. So you have all these amateur leagues going on right now. That it is UPSL. It was like a West Coast kind of thing in California, Arizona, you know, western part of the U.S., Southwest, and now they've come across the whole country, and bigger clubs are, you know, starting to join it. But in the eastern part and eastern region, you still have these little leagues that have started. So there's a lot of like, it's confusing to figure out, you know. But getting back to Gus, so let's take, you know, New York Penn Cyprians, Penn Cyprian Freedoms, great club. So Gus would have said, you know, with them or with Lansdowne or Greek Americans, who he had some involvement with. His son played with them, EJ, for multiple years. Like, you know, typically, you know, it is what it is. Like we know that they pay players to play. You know, it's not professional contracts. You know, oftentimes just money under the table. But these clubs do pay players, and you know, some do, some don't. I'm not, you know, trying to out anybody here. They can say what they want, but you know, Penn Cyprian Freedoms, I mean, you just look at the roster, and you know, you have several guys that play with the Cosmos, play professional, whatever. And Gus's thing was that, getting into your point about the culture, right, and the people going to watch the game, they, you know, the clubs, you know, he said several years ago, and it's true, is that the difference, I think here, one of the differences is that the clubs don't have their own field. You know, they don't have their own, you know, like little club and fields, you know. So like if you're in, I know from Ireland or England, if you go to a small club, when I went to see Larne FC, which is now a pretty big club in Northern Ireland, play one time, went to see a game there. My friend Steven was playing against them, and they were in the lower division. And basically, it's like you go in to the club, there's a bar, place to sit down, there's a room if they're going to have an event. And then you go around, and then you're going to the fields right there and the stands. And you can go in and get a beer at halftime, And I mean, I remember I was talking with a friend after I got back, and I think a lot of people kind of look down or that or something, but like if there was something like that around here, I'd be there every weekend.
Just kind of to
up the road,
Yeah, I mean that we actually went to a game Glenavon against Glentoran, and it was the same thing. We walked into the bar, and then the field is like behind the bar. It's also like a little restaurant area. And in Germany, when I played there, I was only in the lower leagues in Germany, but and Austria actually. Every club of the like 6 that I trained with, it all was the same look. It was like a restaurant bar. Like there was an area where they could hold like functions, like little mini parties. And then behind it was maybe one field or 2 fields, maybe a training field and a game field. And it was the same setup. So it was, it's a club and that players play for, but it was more of like a community and it was a place where you could just go hang out on a Friday night, have a beer, even if there's not a game, like things were going on. And it's this community feel that's how these lower league clubs need to survive, because they're not selling their players on for 30 million. They're not making a ton in ticket revenue. So they have to create a family. And I'll let you
people
go
are
ahead
members now. And in fairness to the clubs here in New York, I don't know everybody's situation. So I don't know why more clubs don't have their own field. It seems very easy to answer. Okay. The one thing I will say is that we don't see a field for professional clubs here in New York. So I think if,
or anywhere. I mean, it's getting a lot better in USL, but in Greenville, we didn't have our own field. In Madison, it's more, they don't own the field. It's the city owns it, but at least they're like one of the only tenants, I think. But it's no matter where you are around the country, it's difficult to find that like soccer specific stadium. It's getting better, like we've spoken about, but it's such an important thing that these lower league clubs need to capitalize on, or it won't be sustainable. It just won't.
I know here on Long Island, up by you, as well, just in the whole New York metropolitan area, a lot of great clubs, a lot of great tradition, great history, and great present, but there's no place, like I know the Long Island Rough Riders, from what I've read in the news, they've tried a couple times to get a stadium small stadium built so that they can, for multiple purposes, so that they can go professional again, and the impact that would have. Or up by you, if Kingston Stockade or Westchester Flames or whoever, insert club name,
the new the Hudson Valley Hammers, the new UPSL team,
whoever, right? Anybody, were to be able to get their own field and generate the revenue from that, and that's a game changer. And literally, and then you have a club up there, and then you have places for players like yourself, more opportunities for players to play, and that only serves to grow the game, and you see players develop and gives them a chance to more opportunity, more professional environment. You're going to have more players developing, and better competition, and a higher level product, for the whole country. So Gus, is very much like ahead of the curve with his thinking, always looked at things like that. It was just a lot of fun, all this amateur soccer going on, going to all these games with him. It was just sometimes on a weekend, mostly on a weekend, sometimes on a midweek night, on a work night or something like that. This big game, going up to Tibbetts Park, went to see a bunch of Lansdowne, such a strong team over the last several years, and saw some wonderful games up there. Some games, but like got to see some really good players, guys that were out of contract or guys that still kept playing professionally and played for several seasons after we would see them playing or would be on their way up. And Gus and I would just do it. He'd be kind of the guy in charge, and it would be a lot of fun. He'd be People would be looking to him for answers for different things, and there was one game we went to at Met Oval with the Greek Americans, and there was a club from East Hampton at the time, and you're Ovinsari from Jersey was playing
Joseph.
with East Hampton. Okay, actually, was he playing with East Hampton, or was he? Maybe he was playing with the Greeks, but he was in the game, and I think he was playing for East Hampton. And something happened with the referee, and Gus called the game. Like,
was it between Ovinsari and the ref, or was it no?
No, Ovinsari wasn't involved in the altercation. He was just playing the game.
Okay.
Something happened in the game, and Gus got up and called the game. Like, because he felt that the referee. I think he was probably right. I think it was somebody who had gotten a red card, and it was a little controversial. But whatever. It was a red card. Somebody got it. Whatever. And I think the person came into the stand, to the seating area by us. So they were technically off the field. The referee wanted them like out of the park or whatever, out of the area. And Gus was saying, no, the rule is, look, I'm the cup commissioner. You can go. I'll keep an eye on it. No problem. And, he wasn't trying to play favorites. He wasn't trying to, it was just, he was trying to interpret the rules the way he saw it. Okay. So that is what it is. And the referee wouldn't blow the whistle to start the game. And the game just got called. And they had to replay it. And it was just like, that was Gus. Like, you don't mess with Gus. Like, he's going to, if he's in charge, he's going to run it. He's going to run it as fairly as he can. And he's going to make sure that things are done according to the rules. Like, that was a big thing with him. And you may or may not agree with it. And his interpretation may or may not have been right. Although he's upstairs right now saying I was always right. But, I can hear that in my head. But anyway, whatever, people listening to this may, have thought, he wasn't on their side or whatever. I know from running the league with him, and a bunch of us did. And it was we really could give a crap about who wins the games. Nobody, it really did not matter. We really could care less about who won. You would believe how little we cared about who won. People would come and be you're against me. And it was we really don't care.
You're not that special.
But it just is we just love it. We love the game. We love the league. We love the clubs. But we don't care who wins. We just want things done right. So according to the rules. So we had a really successful U23 tournament that Gus and I, Gus really got going again when he became president of the league. And then when I stepped in, we were on a bus ride with the Flames up to play somebody. And he gives me he's calling a bunch of people to get teams to come in. So I'm trying to help him. And then that became my job, one of the 19 or 20 different jobs I had with him with the league. And, we've grown it into a pretty, it's not perfect, but it's a good competition, and it gives guys a chance. And a lot of college played during the summer, and a lot of college coaches were really happy and really excited. I'd be recruiting players pretty hard, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed networking with the college coaches. And most of them would be pretty happy. If the guy wasn't going to play PDL or NPSL, or if they weren't getting a lot of games, they could come to us and play some games. And the games were pretty good, and at least they're kicking the ball around and staying fit, which is better than what a lot of the times the other players would be doing, right? So the college coaches are pretty happy generally to get their players back. It's somewhat close to, match fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. They got to play some games over the summer. It wasn't just the PDL guys. It was everybody, from that area, from our area, from Long Island, from Queens, from Brooklyn, Westchester, whatever. And Gus and I would be running that. But our last tournament that we had in 2019, because we didn't have it last year, both teams that made the final. So we went to both semifinal games, which were both really good games. And we had a great time. And we were running around all these different fields, and having a great time. And that was one of the fun things we do in the summer. But in the semifinals, both teams that won each game fielded an ineligible player. And we were like racking our, one of them we caught, we meaning the league. One of the team that lost caught that said like, oh, so-and-so played, he's not on the roster. So we had to go. Gus, led the way, and we threw both teams out of the tournament. So the final got played between the semifinal losers, played in the final for the win. The teams that both should have been there, and we suspended the teams, players, whatever, and it was just like, for the league, we're just like, we just want to like strangle somebody, because it's like, you just want to see the top two teams go to the final and play, right? And we were promoting it. Michael Lewis would be running our articles. He'd be running articles for us. And, it's not like we're going to get, hundreds and thousands of people coming to the game. We never charged admission or anything. We had the game in Massapequa at a nice field. But, you just want like the top teams, but
So
yeah,
just question. So paint us a picture. So you go to these games at Met Oval or Tibbetts Park or wherever in Massapequa,
Long Island, Massapequa,
wherever these games are. You'd go with Gus sometimes in the midweek, sometimes on the weekend, sometimes these 23 tournaments, whatever it is.
Right.
How many people do go? Is it literally you, Gus, and a dog, or is there a group of 20 people? Is it family and friends? Like, what would you say?
It depends on the game.
Let's say it's a big game.
It really could literally be Gus, me, and a dog, or it could be like people there, like there was like a one club that had like I think they were Chilean or something, and like we would be running the tournament finals. We'd have the finals all in one day. We'd have 2 weeks. It was grueling. We'd have like the league finals and the cup finals back-to-back weekends, or maybe more in between, and we'd be there game after game after game after game. So we'd be there all day watching these games. And like eventually I got to the point where I was just automatically booked to go, and now that I'm married, that would never happen. But like, just because I wouldn't allow it, but like, so we were there one time, we'd be there sometimes, and sometimes if it was like a Caribbean team, you'd have like a lot of supporters and family members, friends. We had a Chilean group though that was there, and there was a few of them there, maybe they weren't Chilean, I don't know, but they would be yelling at us, like we'd be in a tent and trying to get us some shade on a hot day, and they'd be yelling at us like, how could you run this like that, and we're like, we're volunteers, we're here on our Sunday, away from our family and friends, like not at the beach, like we're trying to just do something good for the game, and we have this group of people yelling at us, because of a referee call, And then there's Gus like, no, going ballistic, or they'd send a referee that was like somebody we had said to the association, like, we don't want this guy refereeing a game, or woman, actually, because now too, we have some women referees, because they just they're not able to referee the game, they're not physically able, they're not good at it. They've made several mistakes, and then the referee would show up, and then Gus would be on the phone to somebody yelling at them, One of the funnier stories, not so much to other people, but not so much to Gus, but to other people, was like, we went to a final one night. I went after work. It was a Friday night. It was in like out east on Long Island, not too far. And we were going to go to the diner after the game. So we went to the final. I brought a camera. I was taking all these pictures, putting out social media. And so we left, and I thought Gus was behind me. And we're going up the road to a diner, and he got lost. And then he got pissed because he got lost going to the diner, so he went home, and he wasn't talking to me for like 2 days because he got pissed going to the diner, and I'm like, this guy's crazy. But that was the nature of our relationship, which a lot of my good friend Joe Brosi, who runs the fire department team, he's FDNY, and he runs the fire department team. He's a board member of the league. He'd always be joking around, and the guys on the board would be joking around about how we'd be fighting like cats and dogs sometimes, Gus and me, or we'd be like Billy Martin and George Steinbrenner.
Yeah.
That relationship. And I'd be like, that's it. I'm not talking to him anymore. And then we'd get together. So after Gus said he wasn't talking to me, I went to the state finals This was like our Friday night. I went on Sunday, and I saw him, and he still wasn't talking to me. And I just went up to him, like, look, we can't do this. Like, we gotta, if you get upset or something, let's just talk, and figure it out, And then we still fell out after that a couple more times. Then eventually we got to the point where, like, for the last at least 4 or 5 years, we didn't really have any kind of major falling out, And I calmed down, he calmed down, and I think we both just realized, like, stay calm, and it's not that important. But like when you're doing something and you're putting a lot of effort into it and you're trying hard, and then it's not coming off the way you want, you're gonna get like, yeah, and Gus is pretty short, he was always pretty short tempered, but and sometimes I could be too. So, it was what it was. But he did so much in the game, and like he was trying to run the Westminster Flames with the other 2 Gus's.
that was the funniest part. Like you never, like, when you first come to the club, you're like, hey, what's your name? All the important people. It's like, hey, I'm Gus. The coach is Gus. Then, hey, I'm Gus. And it's like, oh, hey, you're Gus too. It's like, how does that even happen?
There's Big Gus, Medium Gus, which is the Gus we're talking about, Gus Xikis. I think Gus Xikis is Little Gus.
Yeah, Big Gus was like the owner, right? Or
what? They all were.
Yeah, they all were like, Gus Xikis was also Xikis.
Oh yeah,
I can't even get it right. They're all of them were part owner.
Yeah, they all had a piece of it.
Okay. But there was one Gus. There was one Gus that had no part in like the day-to-day operations, and that was the Big Gus, right? Yeah.
He may have before I recent times, maybe like earlier on, but not in more modern times. Yeah, he didn't. And then Ilya was the Serbian guy who also was involved.
Yeah.
And he would always come up. Ilya was awesome because he'd always come up with like iced Dunkin' Donuts, which was like iced coffee. And it was like always like pretty hot out, and you're like and I'm up there like working, doing social media, taking pictures, and all of a sudden he come along with iced coffee. You're like, thank God, it's like coffee and it's iced. It's like it's awesome, and it's like the little things like that. And then Gus would we'd go out to the diner after the game, and we'd all be complaining because the Flames, were pretty bad, and we'd all be like, everybody would be hashing through it, and Gus would be getting frustrated with everybody, and then if Little Gus came, I shouldn't call him Little Gus, but
I mean
once in a while, then we kind of hash through things, and it was just like, what happened to Keegan?
Where is he?
What happened to Jake? And then inevitably after the 2013, then it became like, how's Jake doing? It wasn't like what happened to Keegan. It was like how everybody wanted to know how you're doing. And but that's the guys, and it was like that with our LASFL family, and I call it a family because we are like a dysfunctional family. And there's a few people I'd like to kick out, but I think we all feel like that way, But our board of directors, like, Gus was the head of the family, and like we're all kind of became like a family or a team. Maybe a better example is a team. We were a team, like that was our team. Like we may have our club, and I got involved with like New York Irish Rovers because my friend Willie, they were a club been around for a long time, but we had our club, but then the board was like our team. We had to like work together as a team, and Gus was the head of the team. He was the coach,
Yeah.
So and then with the Flames, he got frustrated with direction for a lot of reasons, and he just basically wanted to change things on the youth side, and the other guys didn't see things the same way, and so he walked away from it, and then Gus had also been involved with the New York Magic, before I really knew him.
In the women's game, right? Yeah.
Women's game, yeah. And they had a really good run at that time. You'd have to really look back at the stats, but I know that Gus was heavily involved on the youth side as well. It's like coaching with like the ODP, for New York, which is a big thing back in the day, back at that time. And, he'd be training the goalkeepers on the women's side, which was a part of Gus that isn't talked about enough, I think, was his ability to train goalkeepers, his love of goalkeeping, if we would ever go to, I took him to some games, like Red Bull games, or if we go to a pro game, and we'd always get there early. So he'd love to watch the goalkeepers warm up and the goalkeeper coaches, and just to see the differences in the training. And he loved it, and he was big into that for so many years. And I think it's just something like his son was like and his daughter too, because his daughter actually played as well. I think she played at Albany, so like they both were pretty good players, like pretty solid players. And EJ played with Stony Brook, and he also played with the Flames. And he did well in the games he played in. So it wasn't like he was just there because he was the coach's son. Like, he was goalkeeper, and considering the circumstances at the time, they had a pretty good team, and he held his own. From what I look back on, with the stats and everything, they had some pretty good teams. But Gus was a really good goalkeeper trainer, and he definitely helped several, especially on the women's side, players that went on to play college soccer and played a pretty good level for college soccer. And like one of the guys that he knew with the diner, like had a couple diners, whatever, we'd go and eat there, and the guy would like pick up the tab, whatever, because like Gus trained his daughter, and she got a full scholarship or something, and so like he really knew what he was doing, or it seemed like it anyway. He could really tell you some interesting things about goalkeepers that you might not see, other people wouldn't see. And then that wasn't something, like Gus Goose wouldn't tap into that for whatever reason. And Gus had his reason, Scoofus, fair play to him, whatever. But, it came to fruition when I was helping them recruit players at this point, and we had Matt Turner, national team goalkeeper now, at our tryout, and we didn't take him. And I was like, I didn't know who he was at the time. He hadn't even started a college game, I don't think, at that point. But like, I just thought, he looks like he's not bad. I don't know what I'm looking at, but like, why not keep 3 goalkeepers, right? We had 2 other guys that had been playing D1 a bit, but look, they were pretty good. Take a 3rd one. Why not? As it turned out, he would have played and for us. And he ended up going to Jersey Express, started every game there. They went to the national finals, I believe. And you worked with them at this point. And then Matt went back to Fairfield, and he's just blossomed from there. But, if Gus Xikis had been there, I'm pretty confident he would have said, like, take him. He's good. He might actually be better than the other 2, which he's better than a lot of people. So as it turns out, so there were like guys like that just came through, that Xikis could see, a little bit, sometimes, especially with the goalkeepers, like he could, like it seemed like they had a real problem getting good goalkeepers in there. And, I think a lot of that was, I think, if Gus Xikis had been tapped in a little bit more, that was a big frustration for him, so, there's a lot of things that are frustration for him with that, but, I tried to tell him, like, look, focus on your own, it's just not working there. Focus on the league, focus on the amateur soccer, focus on things where you have good relationships and, where you have a better chance of success. And, we ended up really focusing on the U23 tournament and put a lot of work into it, and getting a lot of teams in. And, you don't see an amateur soccer league, having a tournament like that. Like, like EDP or, professional type league, where people are paid to work, and, we're all volunteers, but like, they don't even have, leagues that big, because they charge a bit more, they have to, whatever. But we did a, really good job. And, I'm hoping to be able to get back to doing that again, to kind of keep the tradition alive. But, we had a lot of really good players come through, and, they'd be playing in our league, guys, a lot of guys that came to the area, like, that have gone on to play professionally, as we discussed with Michael Lewis, but guys also, like a lot of the Caribbean teams, guys, like O'Neill Fisher just signed today with, I saw with the Galaxy, or he was with DC United.
I didn't see it.
Jamaican player, and like he played in the tournament, like just so many guys, as I mentioned before, Kyle Duncan, Timothy Weah, Dylan Nealis, Sean Nealis. Sean was playing, with Port Jeff in our tournament, and he wasn't even playing PDL. Like, I think he couldn't play PDL because Steve Roach, the Hofstra assistant, was coaching the Rough Riders, and he just wasn't getting a lot of games up at Westchester. Maybe just didn't feel like driving before he turned into a good prospect, but he was playing, a lot in our tournament. And then so many others, it's guys that are, playing USL, MLS, whatever, guys that have come through, just a lot of guys. And there's like a Jamaican national team player, Javon East, that is playing Costa Rica. He's pretty regular for Jamaica now. And I would see him there every summer for like 3-4 years, like playing a lot of games for, a club called Rosedale. And it just was really cool, and it was just fun to go to a park at night and go watch a game. And then, then you'd have people come running up to Gus, complain about this, talking about that, you'd be getting phone calls all the time, and constantly like getting phone calls and just like constant, whatever problem would come up, whatever issue, especially on a Sunday when we had games going on, referees didn't show, they showed late, they missed a call, this happened, that happened, like you could make up the stories, like the things they come up with, like it's really funny, like stuff that would come up, like sometimes not funny, but like most of the time, like really, really funny stuff that would come up, and you're just like, I can't believe people did this, like people are crazy, So but I just really miss him a lot. It's he's one of those people that just is a lot of fun, telling jokes. He'd be doing stand-up at like the national like EGM, USSF EGM, before they go on and start talking or whatever. He'd be going up telling those jokes. He'd be going around and telling those jokes to everybody. He was just a really well-liked guy. I went with him to the regional tournament a couple times after he had a heart attack a few years ago, and I brought him down to that tournament. It was like the first time he got out after, he had a heart attack, and everybody was so happy to see him, and he was starting to feel like himself again. He had this big scare, and it just, we had a lot left. Was just before the pandemic really kicked in March, and I went over to see him at his office, and we were talking, and we were kind of making plans for what we were going to do for the summer for the 23. We're kind of figuring COVID. We didn't know what was going to go on, and then lo and behold, the next day he's in the hospital, and just like that was it. So it's just a real, it's a sad story in that regard. That like just life is so precious and things happen so quick. But just a really fun guy, and just a guy, people, I just really would encourage people who listen, who, love the game, to get more involved. Like I've done, with your local club or your state association, and volunteer and just try to do things for the love of the game and try to help out. And there is a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of, there's a real need for people who volunteer to do more things to the game, just for the love of the game, and unfortunately we don't have enough of that, in our league or in the state association or elsewhere, throughout the country. And back in the day, that's how the game grew here. It was a lot of people volunteering to coach, volunteering to run a club, their kids would be playing, and the community kind of needed it. And, we, I think a lot of that has been lost. It's become so much of a for-profit, pay for play model. And, I think there's good aspects to that, but a lot of the bad aspects are, what Gus brought to the game, which is a guy who knew the game and, volunteer a lot of his time. I'm not suggesting anybody volunteer that much time, because I think it's a little above and beyond, but he loved it, he enjoyed it, it's what he did. But we could definitely use a lot more people like Gus, with a similar mindset to Gus. So I don't know, anything else you think we should touch on? Or
no, I think this is a great, it was a great tribute to Gus, and Gus is a great guy from my experiences with him, and we've discussed that a bit on Michael Lewis, with the podcast with Michael Lewis, and I couldn't agree more with everything that you're saying. And I think also a great part of this podcast is like we've done a lot of professional players or some college players, and we haven't into this like grassroots discussion, grassroots part of the game, and it's an important part of growing the game in any country. and it's probably the part that's missing the most in the United States. So as a low battery there, but sorry about that. As this episode and the Mike Lewis episode are great opportunities for people to listen and learn. And I think you brought so much great insight to this. And it was fun for me to listen because you're obviously the one asking the questions, and we haven't really done a proper like you and your story. So it was great for me to hear. And I think I really do think people will enjoy it. All two people and the dog that will listen. But yeah,
you gotta start somewhere, you know.
You gotta start somewhere. But yeah,
Gus is a throwback to a different time. You know, I won't go on too long, but like just, you know, the pre-MLS era, you know, before 96, when, you know, and going back, and we've touched on that throughout this podcast with Paul Bravo and, you know, other people like him, you know, when they played the game, and there were these amateur clubs that really were semi-professional type clubs, and they still are. But, you know, they'd be getting some really high level players. The amateur soccer, you know, was, you know, some of the players came from those clubs to play for, you know, the 80 or the 90 World Cup, you know. And so the game has transitioned a lot for the better. But along the way, I think the amateur game has lost a bit. And, you know, it's something where I think a lot of people could really discover a lot, you know, in terms of, you know, getting involved, getting hands on, you know, getting you know, not by having to just buy your season ticket, go to your game and sit in your section, but, you know, getting really involved and, you know, going to the game and, you know, being able to, it's a lot of fun just being able to walk around with a camera and get up close and take pictures and have nobody yelling at you. And just like at this point, it's hard to go to a professional game because I'm so used to being able to being the one that runs the game, you know, with my friends, you know. So it's hard to go to a game now where you just have to sit in the stands like everybody else. It's like, you know, I want the freedom. I want to be able to go and get up close, and, you know, and all the little controversies and the humorous side of the game.
The human side of the game, the personality side. You don't get that a lot in soccer just because I mean, when you go to a big time professional game, because there's 80,000 people there, you get it a lot in the NBA where if you have a courtside seat, because you're very close, you hear the dialogue between players. But in local soccer and kind of smaller league soccer, even in like Richmond Park in Ireland, you got that because you're so close to the action. But I think like we've spoken about, but a really cool part about what you did in kind of the New York, Long Island region was you got to see so many of these players that would go on to do great things or had done great things. So it's not like it's not like you go to these games and you're watching guys who can't even chew gum and play soccer at the same time, but you're watching pretty high level soccer. It's just guys that aren't quite good enough or haven't quite gotten seen yet in order to play a professional game. So it's
just made choices, you know,
or made choices that they'd rather make $100,000 working in New York City than make $30,000 working and playing in USL. That's another fair point.
You get a lot of guys, especially from your age group and before, you know, from EJ's age group. Not that I think EJ would have gone professional, but like, a lot of he was a good player, and a lot of the guys in those teams, there was a Josh Trott was a forward that played before.
I remember him.
Good forward, and you know, he got back in shape and played with the Greek Americans a couple years ago when they did a cup run, and he scored 2 goals against Richmond Kickers and they won the game. I think it's what happened, or one of them. Like, you know,
I think it was Richmond that lost to them. I think it was. No, Pittsburgh, right?
No, Pittsburgh. Lansdowne beat Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Okay.
But Josh got in shape and they knocked off Richmond. He scored 2 goals in the game. I mean, don't tell me that guy couldn't have played USL, like if he had really decided. But like, people make choices, and it still happens a lot. Like, you know, guys will leave USL or you know, even MLS back then. MLS was not what it is now. Where like now, if you get a chance, most guys. But you do see guys too. Brandon Vincent, right? You know, didn't he retire pretty early? You know, and you do see other guys that are pretty good players. You know, so you know, so there's you know, you do get a lot of really good players playing. You know, you get a lot of interesting players playing too. That you're like, people playing. But that's the fun of the game, and it's not that, you know. everybody, you talk to everybody afterwards and just have a good time.
Yeah, I honestly, going back to that point, I think the highest level is very entertaining. Like the Messis, the Ronaldo, obviously. I mean, the Premier Leagues. But that middle level to me is less entertaining than a lower level where you have a big discrepancy in between player abilities, because you just see it's a more entertaining game to watch. Like I honestly, unless it's like you take the atmosphere or something into account, but just based on the play, I'd rather watch like a game like this where you have one guy who scores 5 goals and another guy who is not even the most athletic than a game like a lot of times in like an NASL game or a USL championship game. Not all, but a lot of times the players are so even and they kind of cancel each other out, and the game ends up being kind of like just cagey and not as fun to watch because there's no special player that can churn the game, and but there's also no poor player that can kind of open up the game. So the game just becomes just two teams going at it like this. So I mean, I think there's a lot of value in the lower levels and the grassroots level, and I hope we can get more of it. But I think we've talked about this topic we've covered it, and I do hope that people enjoy this. I think it's a great episode.
Yeah, I as time goes on and hopefully more people tune in, then we can hopefully have more people from these different clubs on, and there's some pretty interesting stories. So coming in the hopefully near future.
Yeah, that'd be great. I can't wait. We can lower league America or non-league America. Non-league American series or whatever we can call it.
Yeah.
But that'd be fun for me. And I think you would love it, because I think that's where your passion really lies there.
My people.
Your people. But it's been great chatting today, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time, Jake. And we did this now, and I might try to do some more episodes. I'll see if more people feel like coming on to talk about Gus. A lot of people do. It's just sometimes like going on a podcast or something's a little.
It's also it's a tough topic, of course.
Yeah.
But until next time, I'm the athlete.
I'm the advocate.
And
we are the Aristocrats.